You are sitting at home staring at a screen waiting for the perfect pressure drop. The weather application says it is a high-pressure bluebird day, so you stay inside on the couch. Meanwhile, someone else is out there on the freezing water, pulling in the biggest fish of the season. What if I told you that one of the most sacred rules of fishing is actually a complete lie during the winter? The barometer matters, except when it absolutely does not. Today, we are going to talk about freezing water, cold-blooded fish, and why checking the air pressure in December or January is practically a waste of your time. I promise you, by the end of this video, you are going to realize why you have been getting skunked on the cold days, and how a simple change in your mindset will put more fish in your net. Are you still blaming the weather app when the fish do not bite? Every single angler learns the golden rule early on. Falling pressure means the fish are feeding, and high pressure means you should just stay home. It is a belief passed down from grandfathers to fathers to sons. We read it in magazines, we hear it at the local tackle shop. And for the most part, during the warm summer months, it actually makes a lot of sense. The problem is that people take this exact same summer rule and try to force it onto freezing winter water. Guys will do the exact same things year after year. They will cancel weekend trips just because a high-pressure front rolled in over the lake. They let a little arrow on a weather application dictate their entire weekend. But when the water is hovering just above freezing, the entire biological world of the fish changes. Using summer rules in the winter is exactly why so many fishermen struggle, get frustrated, and pack away their rods until the spring. Let us start by looking at the basic biology of the fish you are trying to catch in these freezing conditions. Fish are cold-blooded creatures. This means their internal body temperature matches the water around them perfectly. During the warm summer months, their metabolism is running at absolute maximum capacity. They need to eat constantly just to fuel their fast-moving bodies. But when winter arrives and the water temperature drops down to near freezing, which is around 32 degrees Fahrenheit, everything changes dramatically. Their entire bodily system essentially shuts down to preserve energy. Their heart rate drops to just a few beats per minute. Their digestion slows down so much that a single small meal might take a whole week to fully process. They are no longer actively burning calories chasing down fast-moving prey across the lake. They enter a state of severe lethargy just to survive the harsh winter conditions. Because their physical needs have changed so drastically, the triggers that make them want to feed also change completely. They simply do not care about a storm front rolling in because they are not physically capable of a massive feeding frenzy anyway. They are simply trying to exist in the bitter cold. Now we need to talk about the famous barometer myth itself and why it is so widely believed. What exactly is atmospheric pressure? It is literally the weight of the air pressing down on the Earth. The old-school theory says that when this air pressure drops, it relieves the pressure on a fish's internal swim bladder. This relief supposedly makes them feel comfortable, which triggers them to swim around and eat everything in sight. Conversely, when the pressure rises, it pinches their swim bladder, making them feel bloated and miserable, so they hide in the mud and refuse to eat. This theory sounds great around a campfire. It sounds logical, but it ignores a massive piece of reality. Water is incredibly heavy. The weight of the water itself pushes down on the fish millions of times harder than the invisible air above the surface. When you combine the extreme weight of the water with the freezing temperatures, the tiny fluctuation of the air above the lake becomes completely irrelevant. Yet fishermen continue to treat the air pressure as if it is a magic switch that turns the fish on and off. To really understand this, you need to understand the reality of freezing water density. Water behaves in a very weird way when it gets extremely cold. It is actually at its absolute heaviest and most dense at 39 degrees Fahrenheit. Because it is so heavy, this slightly warmer water sinks directly to the very bottom of the lake. Meanwhile, the colder water, which is closer to 32 degrees, floats near the surface or turns into solid ice. This creates stratification. The fish are not stupid. They are going to glue their bellies right to the bottom where that 39-degree water is sitting. They are seeking out the warmest possible layer just to stay alive. Down there at the bottom of the lake, under 10 or 20 feet of heavy water, the pressure from the depth is massive. A weather system moving across the sky does not change the temperature at the bottom of the lake. The fish are staying in that specific zone purely because of the temperature, not because the barometer told them to stay there. Let us break down the actual math of pressure, because this will blow your mind and change how you think forever. Every 33 feet of water equals 1 full atmosphere of pressure. If a fish simply swims up just 2 or 3 feet in the water column to grab your bait, it experiences a pressure change that is vastly greater than the biggest, most aggressive hurricane storm front moving across the sky. Think about that for a second. We fishermen obsess over a tiny fraction of a drop in the barometric pressure on our smartphones. But the fish experiences a bigger pressure change just by swimming over a submerged log. If pressure changes truly caused them physical pain and stopped them from eating, they would never be able to swim up or down at all. The math simply does not support the old fisherman tale. So when the water is near freezing and you see the barometer spiking, you have to remind yourself that the hydrostatic pressure of the water itself is what truly dictates the physical environment of the fish. Now imagine this specific scenario. It is a freezing Saturday morning. You are standing on the edge of the lake. The wind is howling. Your fingers are absolutely numb. The ice is forming rapidly on the guides of your fishing rod. You pull out your phone to check the weather application. The barometric pressure is sitting extremely high and rising fast. It is a massive, high-pressure system following a cold front. Every old school magazine article you have ever read tells you this is the worst possible time to fish. The old-timers at the diner say the fish have lockjaw. So what do? Do you pack up your gear and go back to a warm house? If you do that, you are making a massive mistake. The truth is, the fish in that near-freezing water are entirely focused on the cold. They are reacting to the temperature of the fluid they are breathing. This is the exact moment you need to ignore the old advice, tie on a small jig, and cast your line anyway. You will catch fish while everyone else is sitting on the couch. We really need to emphasize the difference between feeding mode and survival mode. In the summer, a falling barometer might actually signal a coming storm, which means cloudy skies, wind, and lower light. That makes predatory fish actively hunt. They are in an aggressive feeding mode, but in freezing water, fish are almost permanently in survival mode. They are not actively hunting down big meals based on what the weather front is doing. They are sitting perfectly still, conserving every single calorie they have. If they eat, it is because a perfect, easy meal was dropped right exactly on their nose. Opportunity trumps the barometer every single time in the winter. A bass or a walleye will absolutely open its mouth on a terrible high-pressure day if your bait falls directly in front of its face and looks like an effortless snack. They are eating out of sheer convenience and reaction, not because the air pressure told their brain it was dinner time. Understanding this survival instinct changes your entire approach to winter angling. Because the fish are in this deep survival mode and severely lethargic, their strike zone shrinks drastically. In July, a fish might swim 20 feet just to absolutely smash your lure. In January, when the water is practically freezing, that strike zone shrinks to the size of a coffee cup. If you miss their face by an inch, they simply will not move to get it. It requires too much energy. This is where fishermen get confused. You can have the absolute best falling pressure in the world, the exact conditions the old-timers pray for, but if your bait is just 2 feet away from the fish, you will get 0 bites. You will go home and say, the fish just were not biting. But the reality is, your location was slightly off. Location and precision are the true kings of winter fishing. You have to literally hit them on the head. Do not blame the barometer when the real problem was that you did not put the lure inside that tiny, frozen coffee cup-sized strike zone. Let us talk about how weather fronts actually affect winter fishing, because it is not about the pressure at all. It is entirely about the sunlight. A high-pressure system usually brings clear, bluebird skies with 0 clouds. In the summer, bright sun pushes fish deep into the shadows. But in freezing cold water, sunshine is your best friend. The bright sun penetrates the cold water and begins to warm up the shallow areas, especially if the bottom is made of dark mud, rocks, or dead weeds. That dark bottom absorbs the solar energy and heats the surrounding water by maybe 1 or 2 degrees. That tiny temperature increase draws the baitfish in, and the predators follow right behind them. This warms up their cold-blooded bodies and triggers a feeding bite. It was the high-pressure system that brought the clear skies, but it was the sun that caused the bite. The pressure itself did absolutely nothing. Fishermen see the high pressure and think it is bad, totally missing the beautiful warming effect of the sun. Conversely, let us look at the illusion of the low-pressure cloudy day. A low-pressure front almost always brings heavy cloud cover. In the summer, guys love this because the low light makes fish aggressive. But in the winter, when the water is near freezing, clouds block the sun. When the sun is blocked, the water cannot absorb any solar heat. In fact, the ambient air usually cools the water down even more. The temperature drops another fraction of a degree. The fish feel that sudden chill, they lock down tight to the bottom, and the bite completely dies. But what do the fishermen do? They look at their weather application, see the low pressure, and expect a massive feeding frenzy. When they get skunked, they are completely confused. They got the cause and effect totally wrong because they are applying summer logic to a winter environment. The dropping barometer brought the clouds dropped the water temperature, and the temperature is what gave the fish lockjaw. The situation becomes even more obvious when we talk about actual ice fishing dynamics. When a lake is completely locked under a solid sheet of thick ice, atmospheric pressure has an incredibly difficult time affecting the water column at all. The ice acts as a massive physical barrier between the air and the water. The fish are practically living in a sealed environment. Your weather application means absolutely zero to a fish that is sitting under 20 inches of solid, frozen water. They do not feel the wind, they do not feel the rain. They only know the water temperature, the oxygen levels, and the tiny amount of light filtering through the snow cover on top of the ice. Ice fishermen who sit in their shanties talking about how the rising barometer killed the bite are usually just making excuses for bad bait placement. If you are dropping lines through a hole in the ice, you should delete your weather application entirely and focus heavily on using your electronics to find the warmest water. Let us revisit the myth of the fish's swim bladder in the winter. Yes, fish have swim bladders. Yes, massive pressure changes can technically affect them, but you have to think about their physical state in near-freezing water. When they are barely breathing, hovering inches from the bottom, and their heart rate is maybe 3 or 4 beats a minute, adjusting the gas in a swim bladder is the absolute least of their worries. Their entire biological focus is simply maintaining enough life force to see the spring thaw. They are not floating up and down the water column looking for a balanced pressure zone. They are glued to the warmest mud they can find. The physical discomfort of cold water far outweighs any minor discomfort from a tiny change in barometric pressure. Worrying about a fish's swim bladder during a bitter winter cold front is like worrying about a scratch on your car while the engine is currently on fire. It is completely missing the larger, more important picture. So, if the barometer is a lie in freezing water, how do you change your winter strategy? You need to throw the pressure theories out the window and focus entirely on finding the warmest water available. I am talking about microclimates. Even a 1-degree difference in water temperature can hold every single fish in that area of the lake. You need to become a detective of water temperature. Look for underwater springs that pump slightly warmer groundwater into the lake. Look for areas with dark, muddy bottoms that absorb the afternoon sun. Look for places where rocks hold heat. Look for structures that block the freezing north wind from churning the water. Finding these tiny warm pockets is your new weather application. If you can find water that is just slightly warmer than the rest of the lake, you will find fish that are willing to bite, regardless of what the atmospheric pressure is doing high above your head. That is the true secret of winter angling. Once you find that warmer water, your presentation becomes infinitely more important than the pressure. Because the fish are incredibly lethargic, you must downsize everything you are doing. Big, fast-moving crankbaits are going to get ignored. You need tiny jigs, you need hair jigs that pulse naturally in the water with zero effort. You need to learn the art of dead sticking, where you just hold the bait perfectly still and let the fish slowly swim up to it. The fisherman who works a tiny bait perfectly in front of a fish's nose will outfish the guy who is waiting for a magical low-pressure system every single time. It is all about technique, patience, and matching the energy level of the fish. If you fish slow, deliberate, and precise, you will trigger strikes. The fish cannot resist an easy, bite-sized meal that requires zero energy to catch. Master the slow presentation, and you will never care about the barometer again. We all know a stubborn old-timer who absolutely refuses to change his ways. He is the guy sitting at the local diner who swears by the falling glass. He watches his barometer like a hawk. He usually catches a ton of fish in October and November when the water is still decent. But then he wonders why his secret spots completely dry up in January and February. He goes out on a freezing day, throws the same big lures he used in the fall, gets absolutely nothing, and then confidently blames the high-pressure sky. He refuses to adapt to the changing seasons. Do not be that guy. Water temperature dictates the rules of the game, not the sky. You have to be willing to evolve your tactics as the water gets colder. The anglers who catch massive fish all winter long are the ones who let the water conditions tell them what to do. They do not let an invisible force in the sky dictate their success or failure. Another critical factor that beats the barometer every time is tracking the forage. Baitfish also react strongly to extreme cold. They do not want to freeze either, so they school up incredibly tight and usually head for deep water where the temperatures are more stable and less affected by freezing nighttime air. Where the bait goes, the big predators will follow. If you find the massive clouds of baitfish, you will absolutely find the fish you are trying to catch. The barometer does not move the baitfish around in freezing water. The desperate search for stable, warmer temperatures is what moves them. If you are fishing a shallow flat because the pressure is dropping, but all the baitfish have moved off into 30 feet of water to stay warm, you are going to go home empty-handed. Forget the air pressure, follow the food. If you put your lure exactly where the natural food is hiding, the predators will eventually take a shot at it. If you are fishing open cold water that is not completely frozen over yet, you need to understand the real impact of the wind. Wind pushes surface water across the lake. This creates currents and mixes the different temperature layers together. A strong freezing wind can completely destroy a nice, warm pocket of water in a matter of hours, mixing it with icy surface water and shutting down the bite entirely. When this happens, fishermen often blame the pressure system that brought the wind. It feels like a pressure change shut down the fish, but it was actually a massive thermal crash. The cold wind destroyed their comfortable warm zone, forcing them back into a state of shock. Understanding the difference between a pressure change and a thermal shift will make you a vastly superior angler. You need to find areas protected from that harsh winter wind so the water temperature can remain stable. Stability is the absolute key to catching fish in the bitter cold. You also need to adjust your expectations regarding feeding windows. Winter fish feed in incredibly short windows of time. During the summer, you might have a bite that lasts for 3 or 4 hours. In near-freezing water, the feeding window might literally be 15 minutes long, occurring just twice a day. Usually, this happens around midday when the sun is at its absolute highest point, providing the maximum amount of thermal energy to the water. If you are sitting at home waiting for a low-pressure storm front to roll in, you are going to miss that tiny 15-minute window of bright, sunny activity entirely. You have to be out on the water with your line already in the strike zone, waiting for that brief moment when the fish decide to eat. It requires immense patience and mental toughness. You cannot time a winter bite using a weather application. You just have to be there, putting in the work, when nature flips the switch. Today, we have incredible technology that proves these old myths wrong. We have advanced live sonar and underwater cameras. We can literally drop a camera down into the freezing water and watch a giant fish stare at our bait. We can watch them slowly swim up to it, look at it, and then turn away. They are not ignoring the bait because the barometric pressure is too high. If the pressure was bothering them, they would not have swam over to investigate it in the first place. They are ignoring it because the lure looks unnatural, or you moved it too fast, or it does not match the tiny bait fish they are used to eating. Seeing this happen on a screen destroys the old barometer myth entirely. The fish are there. They are willing to look. They are just incredibly picky because they have zero energy to waste. Technology has shown us that our presentation is the problem, not the invisible weight of the atmosphere. Ultimately, the obsession with the barometer comes down to the psychology of the fisherman. Fishing in the freezing cold is hard, it is physically painful and mentally exhausting. When we sit out there freezing for 6 hours and do not catch a single fish, we desperately want a reason for our failure. It is really hard for a proud angler to admit that they fished the completely wrong spot, or that their lure presentation was terrible, or that they simply got outsmarted by a fish with a brain the size of a pea. It is so much easier to point a finger at the sky and blame the barometer. It is the perfect psychological crutch. It removes all the blame from the fisherman. But if you want to be a great winter angler, it is time to throw that crutch away. Take responsibility for your tactics. Accept that the fish are acting based on water temperature and challenge yourself to figure out the puzzle. So, what is the final verdict on winter pressure? Does the barometer matter at all when the water is near freezing? Maybe it accounts for 1% of the equation, but the other 99% is purely based on water temperature, precise location, tiny lure sizes, and your own stubborn patience. You have to understand that the fish are just trying to survive the cold. If there is no ice on the ramp and you can safely launch your boat or cast from the bank, you should be out on the water. Period. Stop looking at your phone and start looking at the water. Find the dark bottoms, find the sunlit banks, downsize your jigs, move incredibly slow. If you do these things, you will start catching fish on those terrible high-pressure bluebird days that everyone else complains about. You will become the guy posting pictures of huge winter catches, while the old-timers sit at the diner waiting for the glass to fall. To wrap things up, fishing in near-freezing water is an entirely different game than fishing in the summer, and the old rules simply do not apply. We have learned that the extreme density and temperature of cold water completely override any tiny fluctuations in atmospheric pressure. The biggest secret is that the fish are already down there, tucked against the bottom, waiting for you to do it right. They do not care about your weather app, they care about a tiny, perfectly presented meal that requires zero effort to eat. Throw away the psychological crutch of the barometer, focus on finding those microclimates, and slow your presentation way down. If you do this, you will completely transform your winter fishing success. Thank you so much for watching and braving the cold with us today. If you learned something new or if this video changed your perspective, please make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and drop a comment down below. We want to hear from you. Have you ever caught your absolute personal best fish on a day when the weather app said you should definitely stay home? Tell us your story in the comments.